This is a story about Joey DeFrancesco, a child prodigy that brings organ Hammond B3 to its jazz glory.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Studio A, the Joey DeFrancesco Trio.
Hey folks, welcome back to Gubistar Music YouTube channel. My name is Yakub Saputra. I'm a composer and a jazz pianist. And today we are going to talk about great musicians that we all love and adore. Musicians with infectious joy and fire for music, who despite being a multi-instrumentalist, chose a very eclectic instrument to show his stride. Joey DeFrancesco was born in Springfield, Pennsylvania on April 10, 1971. He had been playing the organ since he was 4 years old, and he was considered a child prodigy. This is thanks to his father, who was a professional gigging organist in Philadelphia. So basically, music was a constant in the household. But there are two particular records that stands out pretty early on during his childhood. They are recordings of Philadelphia organists such as Jimmy Smith and Jimmy McGriff, which left lasting impressions on young Joey. Because his father was a professional musician in town, Joey often sat in various jam sessions every once in a while. He landed his first gig when he was only 10 years old. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Now, we get into a more interesting stuff here. When he was about 16 years old, he appeared on a house band on a Philadelphia TV show called Time Out. He was actually playing alongside the one and only Christian McBride. Yup, you heard it right. The now famed bassist Christian McBride was actually his fellow high school classmate at the time. The show was supposed to spotlight young trumpet players, and these trumpet players got to play in front of the great Miles Davis, and he would then give a brief comment on their performances.
How do you sound, Miles?
He needs some practice. He knows how he sounds. He knows.
So basically, the house band was supposed to be invisible, right? But Miles saw something else. Take a look.
Yeah, they gave me a bunch of stuff.
Do you have to play it? I mean, do you actually blow through it?
Yeah, you blow through it. What's your organ player's name?
The organ player here? Let's actually take a minute and meet the man. I thank you very much. We got Joey DeFrancesco on keyboards. Hi, Joey. How you doing? Very good.
So basically, he was more interested at Joey's playing than the trumpet players. Notice that even then, Miles already see him as an organ player instead of just another keyboard player.
What's your organ player's name?
Even though he didn't exclusively play organ sound for the entire show. That means Miles must have seen Joey's specific skill in organ. The story goes, after the performance, Miles came up to him and freaking punched Joey in the chest while saying, "You can play, motherfucker."
Ooh, that dog a hunt. Damn, Dr. You can play, man.
And Miles actually asked Joey for his phone number. Long story short, Miles called him, but he wasn't there. He wasn't home. His grandma was picking up the phone and left a message for Joey. And when Joey came home, the grandma said that, "Hey, you know, there's Miles something called you earlier. You might want to give a call back." And at that time, Joey thought that Christian was actually pulling a prank on him, but he ended up calling that number anyway. When he called the first time, Miles answered and he said, "What?" with that raspy voice. And he quickly hung up the phone because, I don't know, he probably just so scared and very nervous with that voice on the other side of the telephone. But then he called again and Miles asked him like, "What? Did you hang up the phone?" Long story short, Miles invited him to his apartment in New York. They jammed for a bit, and then he went on touring with Miles Davis for the next 6 months. Just like every musician that ever played with Miles Davis, Joey DeFrancesco went to become an important jazz figure after leaving Miles Davis' band. His professional career really took off when he became one of the finalists of the first Thelonious Monk International Jazz Piano Competition. He impressed George Butler, who was at the time was a producer and an A&R executive at the Columbia Records. So he offered to sign him for about 5 albums contract. Later that year, he released his first album titled All of Me. probably gonna be very nerve-wracking for Joey DeFrancesco because in this record, as you can hear, he was not only playing with a trio or just a combo, but also with a string orchestra behind him. So it's probably like a new experience for this young Joey DeFrancesco, who usually play in a trio or quartet settings. Well, after that, he quickly rose into fame and started collaborating with many musicians, including John McLaughlin, who was also a fellow Miles Davis alumni, Dennis Chambers, David Sanborn, and many other big names in jazz. Well, that's kind of typical. But what not typical is, he often invites his dad, who is, as I mentioned earlier, was also an organist, better known as Papa John DeFrancesco, and even his brother by the name of Johnny DeFrancesco, who plays guitar, to play in a couple of his records as a guest, which is kind of sweet if you ask me. And so on, he continued playing shows and recording as a band leader as well as a sideman. As band leader alone, he produced a total of 30 albums, which is crazy. And up until 2013, it was reported that he played 200 plus nights a year throughout the course of his career. Side note, even though he makes his name playing the Hammond B3 organ, he actually also played trumpet, inspired by Miles Davis.
I started playing trumpet when I was around 18, 17 because of being around Miles, you know. Right. That made me want to play the trumpet.
Wow. And saxophone. And he just started playing saxophone in 2018, according to him.
Yeah, I started in November of 2018.
By the end of his career, he was nominated 5 times for Grammy Awards. The most recent nominations was on the 62nd Grammy Awards in 2020 for the Best Jazz Instrumental Album. Jazz Times calls him the best Hammond B3 player on the planet, which is a huge thing. And as for Downbeat magazine, he won a whooping 11 times for the Downbeat Critics poll for organ and won Downbeat Readers poll every year since 2005. That means in the better part of the last 20 years, jazz listeners have been thinking of Joey DeFrancesco when they talk about jazz organ. That's the reason why in 2014, Joey was being inducted into the Hammond Organ Hall of Fame, which is very well deserved. Now let's talk about his style of music. His style of music was referred to as a swinging Philly sound. Well, Philadelphia sounding, you know, because he was a native Philadelphian. He has a solid bebop chop, ferocious yet rhythmical is some of his best features. He often treated the organ as a percussive instrument. Sometimes he just smashed his hand on the lower manual indiscriminately sometimes just to make an accented sound like a drummer would. He was such a showman, no questions about it, who apparently feels four limbs weren't enough to obtain the sound he wanted, that he produced a huge chord by laying his quote-unquote considerable head on the keys. But he is a romantic at heart. In 2004, he released a tribute album called Joey DeFrancesco Plays Sinatra His Way. His way is light and entertaining. It's almost always the case. He once said in an interview something like this: "I think these new players are too damn serious. The joy of it and the fun of it is something that jazz has lost. We are entertainers after all. If you don't look like you're having fun on stage, how is anyone in the audience supposed to?" Hey, you know what? It gets me thinking. Bottom line, his performance was always energetic and fun to watch. There was almost a childlike enthusiasm every time he played. To me, he was a mature musician. He grows into a mature musician with a wonder of a child prodigy that he once was. And as you might have heard, the maestro just passed away last Thursday, August 26, 2022. There was no report of the cause or the whereabouts of his passing as the making of this video. Nevertheless, his legacy and joy will stay in our hearts forever. Thank you so much for watching. I see you guys in the next video.